Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Kidlit Distancing Social. I'm Laura Backus, publisher of the Children's Book Insider newsletter, and your host for this evening. If you're brand new to us, watching for the first time, and you want to get on our mailing list, you can go to writeforkids.org/ultimate-cheat sheet. You'll get on our list to hear about our socials, plus all the other great stuff we do. We do other things as well. And you will get a free ebook, The Ultimate Children's Writing Cheat Sheet. We have been in business for 30 years as of May of 2020. We're coming up on our 31st anniversary in business. Oh my gosh. And this sort of compiles all our best beginner tips from those 30 years. So that is yours for free for getting on that list. And if you are curious about Children's Book Insider, our monthly newsletter, or want to subscribe, we have a special deal for our socialites, $5 a month. writeforkids.org/CBI. You get the newsletter every month delivered to your inbox. It's about 20 pages a month. It includes an editor or agent spotlight interview every month where they give us a special submission code so our members can submit with this code and jump over the slush pile, which is awesome. It's also got lots of other marketing info, articles, interviews, etc. And you have access to the Children's Book Insider membership site, which is called the CBI Clubhouse, where we have 30 years worth of information that you can access, all with your subscription. So writeforkids.org/CBI. So now we get to celebrate, woohoo, the successes of you. So, and I have a nifty little new visual here from lots of kids jumping up in celebration. Added that this week. I wanted to just mix it up a little bit. So, two great celebrations. First of all, Bruce Glass is ready to release his first self-published picture book, Jumping Jim, about a toddler who likes to jump wherever he goes. He's doing the final proof edits and should have the book available in the next couple of weeks. So congratulations, Bruce. That is very exciting. And Shannon Anderson's new rhyming picture book, Too Shy to Say Hi, features a young girl who navigates the difficulties of shyness and social anxiety with aplomb. It was released this month from Imagination Press. So congratulations, Shannon. Those both look awesome. I want to hear your good news. Send me an email to mail@writeforkids.org and put celebrate in the subject line. And we'll feature your news on a future Kidlit Distancing Social. And no celebration is too small. Publications are great, but anything from I got a great idea I'm excited about, to I found a critique partner, to I revised my manuscript, to I got published, anything in between, we want to celebrate with you. So let me know your good news. Links of interest. I have a great one for you this month. And this is Max. He's bringing you the link this month, or this week rather. How to End a Story Right, 13 Tips Every Author Should Know, is a great new post on the Readsley blog, which talks about 6 different types of story endings and which one is appropriate for the particular kind of story you are writing. And it also gives you lots of great tips on how to incorporate those endings into your story. So the direct link, you can see it on your screen there, blog.readsley.com/how to end a story. There's lots of hyphens in there. If you can't write fast enough or you don't want to copy this down, just go to you can Google Readsley blog, Reedsy. I keep putting an L in there. I'm sorry, Reedsy blog, Reedsy blog, and just look through their posts. This particular post was on April 13th of 2020. Reedsy blog. It's a great blog. there's a lot of great articles on it. And Moira asked, can I post it in the chat? I would, but I cannot copy the link from my screen here to post in the chat. However, when we send out the replay, we always post all the links right below the replay, which you'll get tomorrow. So it'll be easy to find it that way as well. Oh, thank you, Vance, for putting it in there. Screenshot or phone pic. Yes, feel free to take a screenshot, anybody. Okay, now for my awesome guests. So I have two wonderful guests tonight. Jean Daigneau. And Jean, I'm sorry, I meant to ask you how to best pronounce your last name when we logged on earlier, and I forgot. So you can correct me when you come on. She's been published in the adult and children's newspaper and magazine markets, including Highlights for Children and Fun for Kids. Her work has appeared in Guide to Literary Agents and Children's Writers and Illustrators Market. Her book, Code Cracking for Kids, Secret Communications Throughout History, with 21 Codes and Ciphers, was published by Chicago Review Press. And her next book, also with that same publisher, Ellis Island and Immigration for Kids, is scheduled in December 2021. She is a former regional advisor for Ohio North SCBWI, and serves on the executive board. And Jean is our genre spotlight contributor to Children's Book Insider. So if any of you are subscribers and her name is familiar, that's why. Gloria Adams spent most of her career as a children's librarian and storyteller. She has been published in various books and magazines and wrote her picture book, Ah-Choo, with co-author Lana Wayne Koehler from Sterling Children's Books. She's got 3 nonfiction books under contract that are coming out in the near future, and has published 14 books through her independent publishing company, Slanted Ink. Now, together, Jean and Gloria make up 2-for-1 Kid Critiques. And ladies, feel free to turn on your cameras and at this time. In this critique service, they critique picture books, early readers, early chapter books, and middle grade novels and other works on a project-by-project basis. Now, what's really unique about 2-for-1, which is one of the reasons I wanted to bring it to your attention, is that for one price, you receive 2 independently written critiques, one from Gloria and one from Jean, along with a collaborative summation of the project. So you are actually getting 2 different viewpoints on your manuscript, which is great. You know, if you belong to a critique group, you might have several different opinions, but that's always valuable. So welcome, ladies.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us, Laura.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Laura.
Jean, can you please say your last name for me?
Yes. Daigneau, like D-A-N-E-Y-O-U. Daigneau.
And actually, that's the way John pronounces it. And I meant to ask him to pronounce it for me again, because I was like, well, that's probably right. Daigneau.
That's okay.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay. No problem.
Anyway, welcome.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay. So let's get started here. We have a lot of brand new writers who watch the Kidlit Distancing Social who are fairly new to writing for children, who might not be aware of what editors and agents expect in a submission-ready manuscript. So, Jean, why don't you start off? Can you tell us how done a manuscript has to be before you submit it to an editor or an agent?
Sure. Of course, you want to submit the strongest book that you can write. You know, many times people will say to editors, you know, what are you looking for? And they say the best book that you could possibly write. So you want it to be as perfect as it can possibly be. Definitely things like typos will, send up a red flag to an editor that perhaps you're not as professional or as careful, or, might send a signal as far as the time you take, that you've put into your story. So you want to watch out for things like that. If you're not good at grammar, that's okay. A lot of people are not. You can get a grammar book and learn all the comma rules. Those are easy things. But the elements that Gloria and I are going to address tonight, some of the, bigger picture ones, as well as the smaller ones, are all things that you'll want to be watching out for. And you can Google any of them and you can get a lot of information. And since you mentioned critique groups, Laura, I'd like to mention that Gloria and I are in a critique group together, and we both highly, highly, highly recommend that you get in a critique group if you can. I can't imagine, well, first of all, I don't think I would be where I am without my critique group. Part of the support of the highs as well as the lows, but also as far as revisions, working through problems, seeing things that we don't see, those are the things that are going to take your story to the level where you will be ready then to submit to an editor.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Great. So, Gloria, the revision process is really a lot more complicated than just running your manuscript through spell check and tweaking a few words here and there. As Jean said, those are kind of the easy things.
Yeah.
There are, as Jean mentioned, big and small areas, types of revisions to look at. So after completing the first draft, what's sort of the first step an author should take when they're starting their revision process?
Okay, well, everybody's going to have a different opinion on that. I have two things. One of the big things you want to do always, all the way through, is to read it out loud. Read it to your family, to your dog, don't read it to your cat, they don't listen. Just whoever you can read it to, or just to yourself. You will catch redundancies, awkward sentences, stuff like that. So that's really good to do. But one of the big things to do that I have found, actually from doing this business, and I do now with all my manuscripts, is to look at intent. So it's threefold. You look at, why are you writing the book? Some people just say, oh, I just want to write a book. But a lot of you have, a reason you want to write the book. You want to teach about like anxiety, like things like that, children dealing with problems. Whatever yours, know what your intent is. This is to help you focus. Know the intent for your main character. What do you want them to do and how do you want them to end up? And then also the intent for your reader. What do you want your reader to get from the book? Who's your target audience? Do you know who that is? And what their books are supposed to look like? Know what you want them to feel like when they finish the book. And if you think about those three things, it will help you to continue with your revisions. And then, of course, get it to your critique group.
That's very interesting. I love that. I've never heard that sort of first step before, but you're right. You have to sort of step back and say, why am I doing this? Who am I doing it for? What am I trying to communicate here, to really be able to judge if you've done it? Do you think that after answering those questions, Jean, I'll throw this one to you here, or whoever wants to answer it really, that an author can objectively look at their manuscript then and see if they have, if their work truly matches the intent, or is it at least a place where they can say to their critique group, here's what I was trying to do, can you tell me if I got there?
I think if you ask yourself those questions as you're writing, or even before you start writing, and then you look at it again after you write, the problem is, what you think you've put into the story and what your reader gets out of the story are not always the same thing, because you're so close to the story and the back matter and those details that you may have included and some of them you may not have. And again, that's where, having a critique partner, is very helpful, I think.
Mm-hmm. It's so true, because the story is so clear in your head, or the nonfiction piece makes so much sense in your head, but whether you actually got it from here to the page is something that other people might need to tell you. Right.
And we get, we get stories that I find I'm myself asking, what are they trying to do here? Because it's not clear.
Yes.
So if you try to look at that before you continue, it helps sometimes just to
Okay.
focus.
Terrific. That's great advice. Okay, so Jean, are there layers of revisions? And if so, should the author tackle one layer at a time or all of them at once? What's your best approach?
That's a good question. I mean, we all have our different writing styles. Some of us are pantsers where we sort of, write as we go, and some are outliners. And so I think that applies also for revisions. But, I think a lot of people will focus on one chapter or one scene at a time. Each scene should be complete in itself. It should have some arc or perhaps some tension or, different elements that you learn. And a lot of this comes with writing and practice. And so you learn some of these things, as you hone your craft. One thing to keep in mind is if you change something in chapter 2, let's say the way your character reacts to something, or maybe you have a character that someone says isn't very likable, and you change something, then you need to stop and think, okay, how does that affect how that person reacts in chapter 5, 3, 4, 5, well, all of the chapters or the rest of the story. Those are big picture things that you need to think about. I had a middle grade novel that I wrote, and it was way too long, and I ended up cutting out a character who I loved, kill your darlings. I called her Bubkey. She was the grandma. Well, I had to go through the story, even though it had been revised multiple times. I had to go through from beginning to end to make sure that any of those little places where my character was talking about visiting Bubkey or was going to call Bubkey or do something, that they either, Bubkey was off screen at this point, so I could still have some of them, but it took out a huge chunk of the story, and it affected multiple chapters afterwards that,
Right.
you don't always think about. The other thing is with some of the changes, some of the smaller ones like sensory details and adverbs, strong verbs, and those kinds of things. Those kinds of things you can do one layer at a time. You can wait till you're done, and then you could go scene by scene and say, do I have sensory details? Would they enhance this scene? And those are the kinds of things that you can fit in. So I think it depends a little bit on what elements you're dealing with. If it's the big picture thing, you're going to approach it a little different than some of those smaller things.
Sure. And if there are a lot of big picture issues, you do want to save those sort of line edits for the end because you may end up deleting whole scenes. And if you
That's right.
spend time tweaking them and then
Yes.
delete them, it's
Yes.
wasted editing energy. So
Absolutely. Yep.
all right. So, oh, by the way, I just want to bring to your attention, everybody, Regina, thank you for that lovely comment in the chat box. You said it for all panelists, so I'm the only one who can see it, but Regina said she has used the two of you for her manuscripts, and she can say without a doubt that you are amazing.
Aw.
So
Thanks, Regina.
Thanks, Regina.
I just wanted you to
Thank
know
you.
that.
That's very sweet.
Yes.
Thanks.
So Gloria, you the 2-for-1 Kid Critiques does picture books, early readers, chapter books, and middle grade novels. So this is a wide age range. Is the revision process different depending on what type of manuscript the author is working at? And is your critique process any different depending on the format and the age group?
Okay, you want to know what our process or for people doing their own?
Well, I guess that was a two-part question, wasn't it? What's let me ask, when you are as a critiquer, or if because you kind of stand in for the potential editor if they are receiving this manuscript, from an author. So what do you look at with each kind of book and say, ooh, this would need to be revised, which might be what an editor would also see?
Okay. I want to say too, we also do young adult.
Okay, great.
But we don't list it because it's different for each one as far as cost. So we don't, but we have done young adult also.
Okay.
Yeah, your picture book, you're looking for different things in the picture book because you have illustrations. So you're looking to make sure you have enough spreads, that you know what size, how many you're supposed to have. Also leaving enough room for the illustrator to do the pictures on each page. You have to have enough action. You know, if they're just thinking on something, there's nothing to draw.
Mhm.
So you have to give room for the for the illustrator. Leveled readers are a whole different ball of wax. We don't get too many of those, but they're very difficult in the way that they're structured, or they're different, and they're different for each age group, each reading level. So if you're going to do readers, you really have to read a lot of them and know exactly what you're doing. And I would highly recommend, if you're going to do that, to talk to a reading specialist. We did this one year at the library. We redid all our leveled readers, and we got a reading specialist, and we were amazed that we were sticking things in the wrong place. Once we got this done, moms could come in and dads and say, I need level 18 on so-and-so scale, and we had it and we knew where it was. So if you're writing, you need to know that too. Okay,
And
so that's the whole thing. Yeah.
Let me stop you real quick, because that's a very interesting point with the leveled readers. A lot of people might not even know what they are, but they're the
Early
general
readers.
term is easy readers. They're for kids
Easy.
who are learning to read on their own, but they're in levels of complexity.
Right. Like
And
kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade.
right, exactly. And depending on which publisher is publishing the series of leveled readers, the levels are different. So when someone submits a manuscript to you that's a leveled reader, do you want them to tell you, I see this as a Random House Stepping Stone book level 2? Or do you just sort of, or do you want them to tell you, I see this as first grade? And then however that fits in the particular leveled series, you
I
know?
don't know. What do you think, Jean? I think we haven't had too many of
We haven't
those.
had, yeah, we have not had too many.
And I think we've just asked them, where do you see this? You know, what age group,
What
and
age group?
have you read? And then we will recommend books at that level too.
Okay.
We do that
Great.
too.
Great. Okay.
If that helps. I don't know.
It does, yes. Okay. So continue. I interrupted you.
No, that's okay. Of course, you know, the longer books, it's story arc and plot and character development and everything more than in the other ones.
Right.
Although that goes all the way across story arcs.
Yeah.
Everybody, editors want story arcs. A lot more, I think, than they used to, even in concept books now.
I agree.
So we're finding, yeah.
We have a question. And by the way, if any of you have questions for Jean and Gloria, please put them in the Q&A box. But I see in the chat box one that I will pick out here. Do you do nonfiction critiques? And if so, what are the things you look at there?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, go ahead,
Yes,
Gloria.
yes,
Sure.
we do. We have a rubric for fiction and one for nonfiction that we go through. We absolutely do. Again, sometimes editors want story arcs with that. And that's hard, especially, you know, with biographies or something.
Sure.
But yeah, we have maybe different criteria that we look for: back matter, sidebars, if they're doing sidebars.
Okay, great. So you have a whole,
If
you mentioned a
that's,
rubric, so you have a whole system. You're checking the
Yes.
boxes for everything. That's
Yes.
great to know.
yes, we fill in and send to, yeah.
Great. And that's not, I mean, editors, they might not have a box that they're checking off, you know, a list they're checking off when they're reading a submission, but in their head, they are thinking a lot of these same things.
Right.
Does this have a story arc? If not, how much work is it going to take? You know, do I think the author can pull off a story arc? And do I want to invest in this author and work with them, or do I want them to go do it and then resubmit? So there's these questions are going through an editor's mind. And so it's great to have you asking a lot of those same kind of questions at a point when you can actually give revision suggestions to the author and they can handle these things. Great. So Jean, what are some of the most common sort of big picture mistakes you see authors making in these earlier drafts that they send to you?
Okay, well, big picture, a common one is kind of a weak plot. And by that, I mean, there's usually not enough tension. There's usually not enough, you know, emotion. There's usually not enough, you know, or enough conflict. You know, the story may just kind of go along without a whole lot going on until chapter 7, when something major happens, you know, where there should be conflict and it should be getting increasingly bigger as you go along. And oftentimes the conflict or the tension as a result of something that the character, him or herself, you know, has done. You know, that's of course, you know, important. So I would say that's one of them. Story arc, we've talked about a little bit. Story arc is a big one. You know, you want to sort of see that rising action and then that resolution at the end. And I think, as you both have mentioned, you know, story arc is something that that editors are now looking for in nonfiction, nonfiction picture books even. And I do have one to recommend for anybody. It's by Candace Fleming, who's an amazing, multi-talented, you know, award-winning author. It's called Honeybee. I don't remember the whole subtitle. I think it's The Busy Life of Apis mellifera. But
Yes,
if you look
right.
up Candace Fleming and Honeybee, it's a beautiful book. And to me, it really shows that story arc in getting to that ending the way you want it. So that's a biggie. The other thing is character growth. This is huge. Your character has to be different at the end of your story than he or her was at the beginning. And this is true for picture books, and it's true for everything. And the one way that Gloria and I tell clients to do this, and this is not our own idea, but I borrowed it from another author, is you take your character at the end of your story and sort of in your mind, you put them back to the beginning and see if they're the same. And if they're the same, then they haven't changed. You know, they need to be more confident, they need to be stronger, they need to, you know, all of those elements that they had to go through when they were fighting. You know, you look at Harry Potter. Harry Potter at the end of book 7 is not the same kid he was when he was, you know, starting out there, you know, dealing with you know, the family that he was living with. So that to us is one that we look for ourselves with our own writing, and to us it really sort of helps to cement you know, that idea of character growth and character change. That's huge. That's huge for adult books. It's huge for everything. The other thing that I personally like, that's a favorite of mine, especially with picture books, is the rule of 3. The rule of 3 is when I did research, I think for an article for you, Laura, I found out that 3 is the smallest number that your brain recognizes as a pattern, which is why people connect with it and why it works so well. And that's why we have the 3 bears and the 3 little pigs and, you know, the 3 musketeers and all the 3 things, the 3 stooges. And, you know, I personally like that, and I look for that in picture books. Sometimes it could be repetition, sometimes it could be 3 scenes, sometimes it could be 3 tries. And a book I would highly recommend for that is Too Many Pumpkins by Linda Arms White. It's an older book, but I actually was fortunate enough when I was starting out to attend a SCBWI workshop with her, and she talked exactly about that, about the rule of 3 and how she utilized it in that book. And it's a perfect example of how it's done, and each problem gets larger and how she solves it. And it's really great. So that's just a personal favorite of mine. But definitely, I would say issues with plot and conflict and tension, character growth, and story arc. Those are the biggies.
I think I have Too Many Pumpkins on that shelf over my head. Linda was my teaching partner for 10 years. We taught a weekend workshop called Children's Authors Boot Camp. And
nice.
Yes, Too Many Pumpkins is a plotting masterpiece.
It is.
And you can learn so much by reading that book and just kind of picking it apart and seeing how she did all that stuff. So yes, I'm glad you mentioned that one. So Gloria, what are some of the most common sort of fine tuning or smaller edits that people need? You know, people think, oh, I fixed the big stuff, the editor will take care of the little stuff, but the little stuff is important too, to make a good impression. So what are some of those things that people should pay attention to?
Okay, very important. One of the things is double tags. This is something I had no clue about until I started writing professionally. And a double tag is, and we have an article coming out in Laura's newsletter next time, and we do talk about this there, but I thought I'd mention it anyway, is a tag is where you tell who's talking.
Mhm.
So you only need one. But sometimes we tend to, I mean, it sounds right sometimes if you say it. So for example, if you say, John sneezed, I'm getting a cold, he said. He said is, you don't need he said, because you already know it's John, okay? Or you might say, John sneezed and said, I'm getting a cold, but said is still not necessary. All you need is John sneezed, I'm getting a cold.
Mhm.
So you can cut down word count a lot if you watch for those double tags. So that's kind of and we see that a lot. And,
Mhm.
you know, I still every so often do that and have to watch myself.
Sure.
So, you know, it's very easy to fall into that because it
Mhm.
sounds right, but it's not.
Mhm. Right.
Another thing is that we get a lot is too many Illustrator notes. And I understand because this is your baby, you know, and you want it to look a certain way. But in the real world of publishing, you don't get to pick that. The illustrator is chosen by the publisher, unless you're self-publishing, and they're going to do whatever they're going to do. And you need to give them room for creativity.
Mhm.
My book, Ah-Choo, for example, we didn't do illustrator notes that I recall.
Mhm.
And Ken Min was our illustrator. And he has this one page, I should have brought it, but he piled all the animals up. This kid is taking animals back to the zoo because his sister's allergic. And they're all piled on this little red wagon, and he's pulling it with a little bike, which of course is impossible, but it's such a cute picture. And we would have never thought of that. So you need to give your illustrator a little more, unless it's absolutely necessary
Mhm.
to the story. You know, leave those out. We say this a lot. Lose the illustrator notes.
Mhm. Mhm. Oop,
Oops, I think she froze.
she froze.
Did I?
Yeah,
Oh,
Am
there
I
you
back?
go. Okay,
Am I
you're
back?
good.
Now you're back.
Yeah, my internet gets unstable. I tell them it's me. I'm unstable, but no. Yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention was endings. We do find a lot of people, and this Reedsy blog is perfect for this. Go read that because endings are something that are very, very, very important. And a lot of people don't wrap the story up, or they don't, you know, they could add a twist or make it something really satisfying to the reader. And that doesn't always happen. And a lot of people do fairy tale endings, you know, like they lived happily ever after. They became friends and that was good. And you don't want to do that. So again, the best thing to do is read books in your genre, see how other people end things, learn about endings.
Mhm.
But we have a lot of writers that aren't doing that right, and they need to learn that. So we do mention that a lot.
Well, and I think in a picture book, it's especially important that the ending be satisfying, and that can be surprising, funny, emotionally satisfying. There's a lot of ways because you want a picture book to be read over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
if that ending isn't super satisfying, it's going to be read one time. But
Mhm.
once kids know there's this big payoff at the end, they're going to ask to have that book read multiple times. And no editor is going to purchase a picture book manuscript that's only going to get read once. Picture books are expensive to make, to buy. You got to get your value out of them. So that endings are so important. This is a question for both of you. Can you tell when you read a manuscript if the author hasn't read current children's books, if they've
Yes.
based all of their knowledge on books from 30, 40 years ago? Does that show in the writing?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can usually tell if they've not read picture books. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or they're,
Yeah.
you know, they'll be 2,000 words long, or, you know,
Mm-hmm.
maybe not that long, but, you know, too long.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
And I
Yeah.
think that's, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I'm done.
Um, it's so important. I mean, there's some great classics. I just wrote an article for a newsletter called Old Books, Young Readers, where I said there's some great classic picture books out there that still stand up. But the thing is, you don't know which ones stand up until you study the current ones. And then if you find classics that look like they could have been published today, those are great mentor texts as well. But writing styles change over the generations. It doesn't mean the old books are bad. It's just pacing's different, word count's different,
Yes.
everything. There's the illustrations do a lot more of the work in the picture books than they used to. So all of those things you just need to be aware of by reading books that have been published in the last 10 years or so, for sure.
Yes.
Let's see. Jean, how often do you advise that writers get feedback from critique partners during the revision process? So should they bring their manuscript in after every single little revision they do, or should they hold off and do a whole bunch and then bring it in? What do you advise?
I advise, yes, that you don't do it too often, only because you don't want to burn out your critique partners. Plus, for me, I understand, that desire when you put that last period, then that you think you've written this perfect book and you want to get it out there. And I'll be honest, I've done that myself. Sorry, Gloria, and my
Me
other
too.
critique partners. You're just so excited and you just think this is the one, or this is, so cool. And you put it out there and then they tell you what's wrong with it. And you're like, okay, well, that wasn't as wonderful as I thought it was. But
Yeah.
so I'm inclined to really try to get that book to the best point that I can get it before I even submit it to my critique partners. I wouldn't dream of submitting it to my agent without submitting it to my critique partners. We have the kind of relationship that they can tell me when it's bad, and as much as that can be an ouchie, that's what you want. You don't want to hear how wonderful it is. You want to hear what can you do to make it better. And that's how we approach our critiquing. We're not here to tell someone what we don't like about the story or what's wrong with the story. We're here to help them take that story to the next level and to make it submissionable, if that's a word, and to get it to that point. So different critique groups, I'm sure, have different, maybe there's different rules and things, but personally, once I get my first critique from my critique group, I try to incorporate as many of those elements as I feel are necessary or that I like or I agree with. And this is one thing people don't always think about, but I always tell, especially our new clients, we tell them, this is your story. We are bringing our own experience, our own, writing techniques and things that we've learned to the table when we critique it. But just like two editors will come away from a manuscript with two totally different viewpoints, you are the author. You are the one that has the vision for your book, and it's up to you to decide whether or not to utilize these comments that we make. And it's the same with the critique group. Someone might suggest something and sometimes it sounds good. And then when I go back and I look at it, I think, no, that doesn't work after all, or no, I don't like that. It doesn't work for me. So that's where you have to decide. But I tend to try to make every time I take it to my critique partners as good as I think it can be at that moment. And then I work through those revisions, and then, if they need to see it again. And of course, for a longer novel, you really don't have the luxury to send it out to them every time you turn around, because it can take, quite a long time to read and get back to you. So, you really want to put as much time into getting it to that point before you send it to them as you can.
Mm-hmm. Great. We're going to get to questions in just a minute, but those of you who are putting them in the chat box, can you please put your questions in the Q&A box so that I don't lose them, because there's too many things for me to keep track of. I was talking to someone, and I can't remember if it was an author or an editor, but who said you should always hold off one of your beta readers to be the person to read what you think is the final version,
Okay.
who's never seen your manuscript before this point. Because, and I remember when I was in critique groups, you remember the previous versions when you're reading the revisions, and sometimes that might cloud how you see the new work.
Right.
But if someone has never seen it before, they're coming in cold, they can give you a really honest reading. So I thought that was an interesting
Yes, it is.
point. Yeah. one more question, then we're gonna go. We've had some questions in the chat box about what your rates are, how much you charge. Do you want people to just go to your website and see that, or do you have anything you want to tell us here?
Sure. Gloria, why don't you go ahead?
Well, we don't want to list all of them because we have different,
Sure.
first 30 pages and stuff like that, options. We have a lot of options.
Mhm.
But our mostly, I don't know, Jean, I think mostly we get picture books, don't you think?
I
I
would
mean, we
say
get a
yes.
lot of picture books, and we charge $60 for a picture book and 30 for a revision.
Wow.
Half price of everything for revision. So,
That's
and
great.
we have a lot of repeat
Mhm.
clients, which we really appreciate, but and we've watched them, some of them grow, and get better at their writing. And so we feel like we're doing something right.
That's great.
So yeah, that's nice. We
Yeah.
just got one who said she got her book published that we had edited. So that was cool.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's really, really awesome. That's always so wonderful when you see that growth happening
Yes.
and then they get published. It's like your child has,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
so
Yep.
great.
Yeah.
Okay. And I will put at the end, I'll put the slide up again that has your website on it and everything so that people can see that. So let's get to a few questions here. So this is a two-parter on how to, if you do have to put Illustrator notes in a manuscript, how do you suggest that be formatted? And also, how should someone best format a chapter break in a manuscript? Do you advise people on sort of standard industry formatting as well so that it looks good when they send it into a publisher?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
We tell them this is, if you're going to submit this, it needs to look,
Mhm.
word count, everything where it's supposed to be. We
Sure.
try to do that if it's not submitted that way. So
Mhm.
it's good to
Yeah.
submit to us that way. Then we won't have to do that.
Yes.
So you absolutely need to learn that for each, editor,
Mhm.
read their submission guidelines, make sure you're.
Sure.
Yeah.
So
And
do you, oh,
I'm sorry, Laura, there are standards, there are things we see out there. We'll see a lot of like paragraphs with like extra spacing in between. Typically it's just double spacing throughout. New chapter starts at the beginning of the next page, let's say, but for a picture book, for example, a lot of times we'll see where people, put extra spacing in between the paragraphs, and those things aren't necessary. It's just straight double spacing, and you can find all kinds of formatting. As far as Illustrator notes, what my agent has me do, and there are different formats for this. I tab over, a couple times, and then I put a bracket and I put ILLO, ILLO note, with a colon, and then I just put, bear is hiding behind the tree and turkey can't see him or something. And that's all you put. Yeah.
okay, great. And then for chapter breaks, you start at a new page with a new chapter, drop down. I mean, I know when I was advising people, I'd say drop down about a quarter to a third of the page,
Mhm.
put your chapter title or chapter 3, whatever, double space, and then start your text. Yeah. And yeah, just indent at the beginning of each paragraph. You don't leave extra
Right.
spaces between paragraphs.
Yes.
It's hard to read a lot of pages, a long manuscript, when there's those extra spaces between the paragraphs.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Um, Jennifer asks, if you envision your early reader as the introduction to a series, where would you explain that? So she's asking in the submission process.
Right.
Would you explain that in your query letter, etc.? What is your advice on that?
Gloria,
I
you
would,
want to
yeah,
respond?
I would think for most if you're doing that, if you're submitting, you're going to be looking at editors that do series.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So they're going to know that's what you're, yeah.
Sure.
And then there are places like Bearport and Abdo, they want only series.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's whatever your publisher wants. You have to know what they want. And then,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but
Yeah.
most of the readers are series.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I
and a
don't
lot
think
of them are done in-house. So it's hard to sell those too. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Jean, go ahead.
That's what I was just going to say. I don't think it hurts to put a line in your cover letter, though, to say this has series potential.
Sure.
You know, and then if if they're interested in it as a standalone, that's one thing. And if if they're not, but again, like Gloria said, you're going to be wanting to target publishers that do series. First off, anyway, as far as those kinds of books, more so than like a middle grade series, for instance.
True. And I'm just going to throw in my 2 cents here. If you're submitting to an agent and you're proposing a series, you want to, in your query letter, give just a real 1-2 sentence description of sort of the hook of the series or the concept that holds the series together. You're going to have a short synopsis of the manuscript you're submitting, which would be book 1. And then you want to have a real short synopsis. I'm talking a very short paragraph of the other books in the series, at least, 2 or 3 more, so that the agent can see that they understand sort of the arc of the series, the concept, because they're looking at the big picture of the series here. So that would be a little different if you're going for an agent.
Yeah, and they have to pitch, so they have to know where you're coming from.
You're right. Educational publishers who publish these leveled readers for schools and libraries, often they're a work for hire. They conceive them in-house and hire the writers. But publishers like Random House or Scholastic, who are also publishing for the trade market, might take series proposals. So you really have to do some research there on the submission requirements of each publisher. Yeah. Okay, so Sheila asks, would the rule of 3 work in a nonfiction biography that spans a lifetime, but with one common theme about the main character's journey? Or is it more for fiction? And again, Sheila, you didn't say if this is a picture book biography or a longer work, but let's assume she's talking picture book biography. Can the rule of 3 work in nonfiction as well?
I don't know, Gloria, you can jump in and correct me here, but I just finished a nonfiction picture book biography, so it's interesting that she asked this. I don't see the rule of 3 as far as the whole book, but I will say that I have used the rule of 3 when I'm explaining she did this, and then she did that, and then she did that. I mean, within a paragraph, I might have 3 elements where I have an example of how this person, created something, and so I give 3 different examples. So in a way, for me, it's almost sort of osmosis that it kind of works its way in there. Or even within a sentence, I might have 3 things, a series of 3 things. Right. So I think it takes a smaller role than, say, in a fiction book where, but you can certainly incorporate it in there in different places. Yes.
Yes, I agree. I can think of specifically of a few not picture book biographies I've read where they use that rule of 3 in one scene where she gathered this, and this, 3 things before she headed out the door, know, and it just creates that nice rhythm to the language and to the scene.
Yes, yeah. I agree.
Okay. Susan says, I'm working on a picture book biography and my critique partners asked me to give the main character more emotion and create smoother transitions between the scenes. How creative can I be and stay true to writing? Oh, this is nonfiction as well. I have limited resource material. So that is the challenge with nonfiction. Making the main character giving the main character more emotion, creating smoother transitions. Well, transitions you probably have more control over, but when working with a real person and you have to rely on your resource material, do you have advice for infusing emotion into that story as well?
Gloria, do you have any comments about that?
Sure. I'm getting ready to publish a biography, actually. So this is interesting that this is coming up, but if you have any quotes, that would be the best thing. I know they're hard to find. Maybe even do more research. That's what I'm trying to do, or what I tried to do. It's finished, but I used quotes from him that I could find, and it was hard to find. But that will give you, that. If you don't have that, if you can include some sensory details somehow, you know, if they're at a particular place, you can imagine what it might smell like, what sounds they might hear, without saying that they saw them or heard them. But, you know, imagine what it must have been like, you know, I mean, you can do things like that
Right.
just to try to get more.
Or, you know, it was
Yeah.
springtime in wherever this place was.
Mhm,
These flowers bloomed, these birds chirped, these, yeah.
mhm.
You know, you can research the location, the settings, and add details like that that you can document
Mhm.
very easily. So that's a great suggestion. So
Yeah.
sensory details, those automatically make us feel more of an
Yeah, you
emotional
can
connection.
relate, yeah,
Yeah.
kind of thing. Like my guy is James Bailey of Barnum and Bailey, so there's circus, you know, and if you've been
Mhm.
to the circus, there are certain smells and sounds and everything at the circus. So try to put some of that in.
Mhm.
Well, and I think too, sometimes you can, I can't think offhand of a perfect example, but you know, you can use words that sort of imply that he might have, you know, he likely would have, you know, wondered, you know, or perhaps he wondered, you know, what's that? What's, you know what I'm saying? You know, you can
Mhm.
sort of put some of those words in there that
Mhm.
kind of let the reader know that, okay, you're not saying necessarily that this person absolutely did that, but it's possible or, you know, probable or something.
Mhm.
And I'm not giving a very good example. I apologize. Nothing's coming to my head, but I think there's a way to kind of work some of those things
Yes.
in. And like you, to your comment, Laura, about weather and things, you know, I did a picture book biography years ago about Sitting Bull, and I called the national weather and I said, you know, this is 1860 something out in, you know, wherever it was, you know, out west, whatever state. I said, can you tell me anything about the weather? And he said, well, let me look. And he said, well, let's see. It was dry. I said, okay, that helps. You
Yeah.
know, so you know, I kind of incorporated that, just that little bit of knowledge, you know, like Gloria said, into the setting and into some of those sensory details, just by that one bit of information that I was able to document just by reaching out to the, you know, to one of the national weather, you know, groups.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I
Great.
have I have an example real quick if you want. For James Bailey, my opening scene, the boys are swimming in the river
Mhm.
and they get out, but I didn't know, I knew it was a hot day. It had to be a hot day or they wouldn't have jumped in the river. So I don't have he didn't say it was really hard not to get in the river on a hot day, but I put a cool dip in the river on a hot day was hard to resist,
Mhm.
without saying he said that. So
Right.
you can fit it in if you can say it in a different
Mhm.
way.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
But to the
Yeah.
point about nonfiction, you know, just to be clear, if there's anything that's not true, it's not nonfiction. You know, I mean, this is kind of this argument kind of goes back and forth a little bit among some authors, and you know, we've read different things, but you know, for the most part, if it's not true, it shouldn't be in there if it's
Mhm.
going to be nonfiction.
Exactly.
That's
Exactly.
important. So.
Okay. Terrific. What are your views on epilogues for books with chapters? And I'll throw in prologues too. Do you have opinions one way or the other?
Um, Gloria, do you? I personally don't. I always read them when I read, you know, books that
Mhm.
have them. I do read them.
Mhm.
I've heard both sides from different editors, you know, over the course of conferences and things.
Mhm.
So, you know, my thought is if an editor doesn't particularly like them and you include it, they just won't read it, or they, you know, won't necessarily read it if it's not something that they feel is important. I don't think it's going to make or break the deal, I guess is what I'm saying. I wouldn't think so. So,
Yeah, I've heard mostly negative stuff about prologues.
okay.
I have.
Not epilogues, but
Mhm.
prologues.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, and I was wondering, as a librarian, if you ever heard from kids who are like, I don't read the first part, the prologue. If you ever
Oh,
got
not
feedback on
really. Talk to
that.
them, but I'm guessing a lot of them skip it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
They
that,
start
that's
at chapter 1.
yeah.
So I think for younger books, absolutely don't.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do that for chapter
I
books,
think,
early chapter.
yeah, I think you could get away with epilogue because by then they're invested in the story
Mhm.
and the
Right.
character, and they want to know what happened after the
Yes.
end of the story. So then
Yeah.
it's intriguing. But the prologue, I do the same thing, even though I will read it. If I see a prologue in any, even if it's a book for adults, I go, okay, I have to read the prologue. You know, the
Yeah.
author couldn't work this into chapter one for some reason, so I have to read it.
Right.
And it's almost like I want to get to the first chapter. Hurry up,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think they're kind of
Yeah.
falling
I
out of
think if you can put in the first chapter, do that. You know, if
Right.
it's absolutely necessary, if you really think so, but only in, you know, I'd say young adult, maybe
Right.
more than.
And I think more common in nonfiction, especially for older. Like I had Steve Schenken on, the
Oh, yeah.
great award-winning nonfiction author, a few weeks ago, and most of his books have prologues. Now he writes for middle grade, young adult, but they're necessary in a lot of nonfiction because you have to kind of give the background. Sometimes readers don't have the knowledge of the historical background of the events that are going to happen. And his first chapter, it reads like a novel. You jump into the
Yeah.
story
Yes,
arc.
it's really good.
So sometimes he has to give a little foundation there so you understand why what's happening in chapter one is so significant. But he does it in such a compelling way that you don't mind reading the prologue. The prologue still reads like a novel, you know, even
Yeah.
though it's nonfiction. So
Yeah. It's
you can
good.
do that, then you can get away with it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a few more here. We have a lot of questions, but we're getting to the top of the hour. Let's see. Let's see. At what point should you join a critique group? For somebody who is still learning to write, I'm thinking it should be after you finish learning so that your manuscript will be the best possible. What are your what's your advice on that? And Jean, you were regional advisor for an SCBWI chapter as well, so I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts on critique groups and when's a good time for an author to start looking for one.
You know, I don't think you can really start too soon. I don't think you need to necessarily feel like you have to be at a certain place or a certain level. You know, the way I look at it is it's all part of the learning experience. And
Mhm.
so if you're with a critique group and perhaps you're not as skilled as they are, I mean, in critique groups, often you find people are at, you know, different levels. Usually, I think our critique group was a little different because we sort of all were kind of at the same place when we got together, one of them in particular. But you know, to me, anything that you could learn from other writers and making those connections is only going to help you on your journey. And certainly listening to them reading their work and listening to the comments that other people make is also a way to, you know, to help you learn. And you know, just like Gloria and I feel like we learned so much just from critiquing other people's work that we feel we can take to our own work. You know, it helps us to realize things that we need to, you know, we need to hone in on. So, you know, I wouldn't necessarily discourage a new writer from joining a critique group. I can understand maybe you might feel a little intimidated. And of course, reading your first manuscript aloud at a critique meeting is like, you know, having 5 root canals with no anesthesia. I mean, it is, or Novocaine, it's painful. But,
Yes.
you know, if you can't put it out there to people that you feel are have your best interests at heart, how are you going to put it out to the public when, you know, they're not gonna, kids aren't gonna hold back on what they think about a book if they don't like it. So,
Yes.
you know, that's all part of the game. You know, it's just all part of the game.
Now, I think people when they're new to writing, they might be reluctant to join a critique group because they think, what can I contribute?
Yeah.
I don't want to just be there to learn. And I appreciate that because I've been in critique groups where a lot of the writers were more experienced and we're fine for a new person coming in as long as they contribute. So
Yes.
you can still, if you are reading current
Yes.
books, you can give your opinions to the other authors when you are reading their manuscripts as to whether things work or not. You are absolutely able to do that. And so don't be shy about that, but know that you have to do that. That's part of the deal when you join a group, is you also have to be willing to give your opinions on other people's work.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I would agree.
But it's hard to put yourself out there. It's hard,
It is.
because
Yes.
it's so very personal.
Mhm.
But can I just say, though, I think anybody who writes a book is brave.
I agree
So
with
don't
I agree.
feel, some people go their whole life and say, I'm going to write a book, and they never do. If you have written a book, good for you. I mean,
Yes.
go for it and do it. I think
Yeah.
you're brave. Just saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
No,
absolutely agree with that.
That's
Absolutely.
huge.
it's a hard work. It's hard work.
Yes, it is hard work. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. Now, we do
Yeah.
have a couple questions about rhyming picture books. Do you critique rhyming stories?
Yes,
Yes.
we do.
We
Excellent.
write rhyming stories.
Well, yeah,
so we,
Gloria had published a rhyming book.
Yes,
So
yes. My book is rhyming.
great, because that is a skill in and of itself, being able to critique a rhyme.
yes.
So that's awesome that you do that. Okay. We have lots more questions, but we're at the top of the hour. So, and by the way, in the chat box, they're forming critique groups as we speak. So,
Oh, great.
Wonderful.
Yay.
and those of you who are listening, watching on replay, sorry, you got to show up live, be able to get into a critique
Yeah.
group. So
Great.
that's just awesome. I'm so
Yeah.
happy to see that.
Wonderful.
Can you, Gloria, repeat your 3 intents that you mentioned at the beginning, the first thing that people should do when they're starting the revision process?
Okay. What is your intent for your book? Why are you writing it? Who are you hoping to reach? What is your intent for your main character? How do you want them to end up by the end of your book? What's that all about? And who is that? And then the intent for your reader. What do you want your reader to get from your book? How do you want them to feel when they put it down?
Great. Thank you. And I'm going to put up your slide again with your website. And if you don't get this written down, we will have this under the replay. We'll have a link to all 3 of these websites, but you can also just Google 241 Kid Critiques, number 4, remember.
Yes.
And it will show up. But definitely go check that out. There's all sorts of information about their critique service, how to contact them. And do you recommend that people first contact you and sort of describe their project, and then you can tell them the rate and that sort of thing? Is that the first step?
Yeah, people do that a lot. They'll say, I have a picture book I want critiqued, and do you have time? How long will it be? Stuff like that. And we ask them to send the title and the word count and the type of book, And then I send them a contract and an invoice and how to pay and stuff like that. And then we have a pretty quick turnaround. We try very hard to get done as quickly as possible. And we've been very fortunate. Jean and I are just kind of amazed. We've had steady work for the last 4 years and hardly have any overlap. So it's really, it's nice, because then we can, we want to do the best we can for each person. So
Sure.
yeah, but we don't want them to have to wait too long. So we try to get to it as soon as possible.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you both so much for all of this. This was great information, and lots of people are loving it in the chat box. So thank you for your time and your expertise. And
thank you for having us, Laura. I
Yeah,
appreciate
thanks
it.
for having us, Laura. It was fun.
And for recommending us. We appreciate that.
We've been helped by so
Very
many
much.
people on our own journeys that we always feel like, it's fun to be able to, feel like we can help other people along the way, so that's always
That's great. That's great. And if you're subscribers to Children's Book Insider, in the April issue, there will be an article by Jean and Gloria on those sort of small level edits. So that definitely look for that. All right. Well, thank you. And thank you all for being with us tonight. And we will see you next week.
Thanks, Laura.
Yeah.
Thank you, Laura.
Sure.
Yeah, it was great.
Really appreciate it.
Yep. See you later.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.